The instant my wife asked me to sit down, I sensed something was coming. It wasn't intuition or a gut feeling, it was the setup. I'd seen this scenario unfold before. The too relaxed smile, the way she absently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and the subtle tension radiating off her. All the signs were there. She was about to drop a bombshell. I leaned back in my chair, setting my beer on the table and waited. "Listen," she began, her voice overly sweet, as if rehearsed. "I've been thinking a lot about us." And there it was, the preamble to some flimsy justification for whatever revelation she had in store. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "I love you," she went on, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "I really do, and I don't want to lose what we have." That sentence told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't planning on leaving me. No, she had something worse in mind. "But I also feel like I need to explore things," she added, her fingers drumming anxiously on the table. Meet new people, experience different connections." I didn't give her any reaction. Just took a slow sip of my beer and let her squirm under the silence. "So what are you saying?" I finally asked. She exhaled, relieved I hadn't shot her down outright. "I want us to open the relationship," she said gently, her eyes searching my face for a sign of agreement. "It's not because I don't love you, I just think we could grow from this. Maybe it'll make us stronger in the long run." She clearly believed this was some progressive, enlightened step forward for our marriage. That I'd just nod, talk about trust, and let her have her adventures while I stayed conveniently on standby. But I wasn't naive, and I wasn't about to play along. I tilted my head slightly. "So, you want to date other men?" She bit her lip, hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, but it's not about replacing you, it's about—" I raised a hand, cutting off whatever excuse she was about to offer. "All right," I said simply. Her eyes widened. "All right?" "Yeah," I shrugged, taking another sip. "If you want to see other men, that's fine." The color drained from her face. "What do you mean?" she stammered, her voice suddenly fragile. "I mean," I said evenly, "I should probably do the same, just to keep things fair." I said slowly, letting the words sink in. "If you're planning to meet new guys, it's only fair I do the same. That way I can actually gauge how you compare to other women." "Yeah, I bet." She crossed her arms, defiance flashing in her eyes. "So what? You're just going to throw everything away because I wanted to have an honest conversation?" I let her words linger in the air for a moment before replying, calm and measured. "No, I'm not throwing anything away. You are." Her breath hitched. I caught the flicker of panic in her eyes, the dawning realization that she wasn't as in control of this situation as she had assumed. The script she'd written in her mind wasn't unfolding the way she'd planned, not even close. The silence stretched between us, tense and fragile. Her face remained impassive, but the tightening grip around her glass of water betrayed her. This wasn't discomfort anymore. She was unraveling. She had thought she could dictate the terms, introduce her idea of an open relationship, and keep everything else intact. But my simple suggestion, comparing her to other women, had upended her expectations entirely. I could see the storm churning behind her gaze as she struggled to comprehend the implications. "I don't understand why you're saying this," she said finally, her voice carefully controlled. "This isn't about replacing anyone, it's just about having different experiences." I leaned back, casually swirling the last bit of beer in my bottle. "Sure," I said with an easy nod. "I get that." I let a small smile form. Maybe I've been too close-minded myself. Maybe I should see what's out there too, just so I can really appreciate what I've got at home. Her lips parted as if to respond, then closed again. "That's not the same." "How's it not the same?" I countered. She hesitated, shaking her head. "I just don't want to risk losing what we have." That made me laugh, a genuine, sharp laugh that made her flinch. "Risk? You're the one who suggested this, not me. You're the one who already put what we have on the line. I'm just saying, if you want to explore, it's only fair that I do too. Why should you be the only one seeing if there's something better out there?" Her face lost its color. I let the silence stretch, letting her sit with the weight of her own suggestion. For the first time in what felt like forever, she looked unsure. That's when I knew the dynamic had shifted. In the days that followed, something changed. Her demeanor softened. She became more affectionate. Her kisses lingered longer. Her touches were more deliberate. She started coming home early from work, something she hadn't done in months. Even her wardrobe subtly shifted. Less daring, more conservative. Not enough to be obvious, but I noticed. and I knew exactly why. I acted as if nothing had changed. The first real fracture in her confidence appeared one evening when she found me sprawled across the couch, idly scrolling through my phone. "Who are you texting?" she asked, trying to sound casual. I lifted an eyebrow. "Why do you care?" She hesitated for a second too long. "I was just asking." "Just a friend," I said with a faint smirk. "Why, worried I'm making comparisons?" Her breath caught, barely audible but unmistakable. I could see the thoughts racing behind her eyes. She had expected me to break, to beg her to reconsider, to fight to keep what we had. Instead, I was playing along, and that terrified her. Later that night, she reached out, trying to initiate intimacy. It felt forced, desperate, like she was attempting to reclaim something slipping away. I turned away. The disbelief on her face was almost satisfying. "But you always want to," she murmured, sitting up in bed, confusion clouding her expression. I shrugged, indifferent. "Not tonight." She didn't sleep well that night. By then, I had little doubt she already had someone in mind when she suggested opening the relationship. Women don't bring up ideas like that out of nowhere. They test the waters first, gauge reactions. She had likely been laying the groundwork for weeks, maybe months. So I did what anyone in my situation would. I started digging. She thought she was cautious, but she wasn't careful enough. A few password resets, some location tracking, and a helpful friend in IT later. I had a name, John, a coworker, single, slightly older than me, not a stranger either. I had met him before at one of her work events. I had shaken at his hand, exchanged small talk, completely unaware that he was probably already imagining sleeping with my wife. The anger boiled under the surface, but I held it back. This wasn't about rage. This was about control. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I let her believe I was still playing her game, and then I made sure she got a taste of her own strategy. A week later, while we were having breakfast, I mentioned casually, "I've got plans tonight." She paused, stirring her coffee with too much force. "Plans?" "Yeah," I said nonchalantly. "Just grabbing a drink. A friend wants to introduce me to someone." The spoon clattered against the side of her mug. "You're going on a date?" I smiled, deliberately relaxed. "Wouldn't call it a date. Just seeing what's out there." She swallowed hard, and I could almost see her thoughts racing, calculating every possible outcome. She had never expected me to take her suggestion seriously, at least not in a way that would turn things in my favor. That night, I walked out the door without so much as a backward glance. There was no one waiting for me, but she didn't need to know that. When I returned, she was still awake, waiting. "How was your night?" she asked, trying to sound nonchalant. "Good," I answered flatly. Her fingers gripped the edge of the couch a little tighter. "Did you meet someone?" A slow smirk formed on my lips. "Why do you care?" She opened her mouth to respond, then stopped herself. For the first time, she was caught in her own trap, left with nothing but uncertainty. The days that followed were thick with tension. She began texting more, constantly asking where I was, what I was doing. She cooked meals I loved, wore my favorite perfume, but I refused to give her the reassurance she craved. I let her stew in that unease. The dynamic between us had shifted completely. She thought she could dictate the terms, but now the control was slipping from her hands, and I wasn't going to stop it. Something in her changed. The smug confidence she once wore like armor vanished, replaced by a creeping desperation. She tried to cover it with forced smiles, awkward touches, and shallow attempts at affection. But I saw through it all, every gesture, every lingering look, driven by fear. Not fear of losing me, but fear of losing control. She had assumed I'd quietly stay on the sidelines while she explored her freedom. Now, in her mind, I was the one exploring, and that uncertainty was driving her to the edge. The first real crack showed during dinner. She had gone all out, homemade food, candles, even a bottle of wine we'd been saving for something special. I played my part well, pretending not to notice her sudden shift. "So," she began, twirling her fork aimlessly. "Who is she?" I glanced up, feigning confusion. "Who?" She let out a hollow, forced laugh. "Come on, the woman you went out with the other night, the one you've been texting." A slow smirk crept onto my face. "Why does it matter?" Her grip tightened around the fork. "Because I think it's ridiculous that you're actually—" She cut herself off, exhaling sharply. "I just think we need to be careful with all this." "All this?" I echoed, letting the weight of her own words hang between us. "You know what I mean." She shifted in her seat, eyes darting everywhere but toward me. We don't want to make decisions we'll regret later. I leaned back, arms crossed, watching her squirm. You mean like opening the marriage? She flinched, the reaction instant and telling. I didn't mean it like that, she said quickly. Maybe we rushed into this. There it was, the first sign of backpedaling. She wanted out, but I wasn't about to let her take the easy way. The next day, confirmation came that her little side project was beginning to panic. My phone lit up with 3 calls from a blocked number before I finally picked up. Hello, silence. Then a voice I recognized, John. We need to talk, he said, voice tight. I smirked. Do we? A sharp breath on the other end. Listen, man, I don't want any trouble. I didn't know. Didn't know what? I asked, my tone even. That you knew, he admitted quietly. She told me things were complicated, that you two were working through stuff. I never, he stopped himself, falling silent. I don't care what she told you, I said coldly. What matters is what's happening now. Another shaky breath. Are you going to tell her you know? I let out a quiet chuckle. What do you think? Silence stretched between us. Then, in a strained voice, he muttered, She's been different lately. Distant, jumpy. I think she's second-guessing everything. Not my problem, I replied flatly. Look, I just want to be clear. I don't want this blowing back on me. That's what it was really about. He didn't care about her. He was trying to cover himself. Coward, I muttered under my breath. I guess we'll find out, I said and hung up. That night, she snapped. I was on the couch, phone in hand, pretending to text, when she stormed into the room. Who is she? She demanded. I didn't bother looking up. What? She yanked the phone from my hand. You heard me, she snapped. Fury and desperation tangled in her voice. Who is she? Who have you been seeing? I leaned back, arms resting comfortably as she scrolled through my messages. There was nothing for her to find. I hadn't actually been texting anyone. But that wasn't the point. The point was clear. She was falling apart. You really don't like this feeling, do you? I mused. Her eyes snapped up, a mixture of anger and confusion clouding her gaze. What are you talking about? I stood, casting a shadow over her. The uncertainty, the doubt, the fear that maybe you're not as irreplaceable as you thought. She swallowed hard, trying to hold her composure. You were fine when you believed I'd sit back and let you have your fun, I continued. But now that the tables have turned, suddenly you can't handle it. Her breath hitched. I leaned in slightly, my voice low but firm. Tell me, did you ever really want an open relationship? Or did you just want to cheat without consequences? Her lips parted, but nothing came out. I nodded slowly. That's what I thought. I let her simmer in her panic for 2 more days before playing my final card. When she came home from work, there was an envelope waiting for her on the kitchen counter. Inside, every message exchanged with John, every hotel reservation, every call log, and most importantly, a drafted separation agreement. She entered the living room, the envelope trembling in her hands. You knew, she whispered. I took a slow sip of my drink, setting the glass down carefully. Of course I knew. Tears welled in her eyes. Since when? I shrugged. Long enough. She drew in a shaky breath. So what now? I exhaled slowly. You have a choice. You can sign that agreement and walk away with some dignity left. Or you can fight me and make things a whole lot worse for yourself. Her face crumpled. I don't want to lose you. I let out a dark chuckle. Funny, you didn't seem too concerned about that when you were with him. A sob escaped her, but I didn't flinch. She had expected me to stay quiet, to accept being second place. Instead, I made her realize she had never been first. She stood there, clutching the envelope so tightly her knuckles turned white, scanning the damning evidence inside. Her face drained of color, her body shaking, whether from shock or the crushing weight of realization. I didn't care. She had lost. Her carefully built illusion had crumbled, leaving her no way out. Her lips quivered as she whispered, I can fix this. I almost laughed. Fix what? Us, she said desperately, voice cracking. Us, I echoed, raising an eyebrow. You mean the same us you were ready to throw away for John? The us you didn't seem to care about while planning your little adventure? Her breath hitched again. I wasn't trying to replace you. No, I said flatly. You just wanted me to sit quietly in the background, waiting for you to get bored. You wanted a safety net, a backup plan. You wanted to test the waters, see if there was something better, while keeping me around, just in case you didn't find it. Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. She expected me to beg. to fall apart, to fight for her like some desperate fool clinging to scraps of affection. Instead, I let her fall on her own sword. One last pitiful attempt. Her voice softened, that familiar warmth creeping in like a ghost of what used to be. I was stupid. I see that now. I don't want anyone else. Just you. I shook my head, my voice cold and steady. No, you don't get to say that. Tears welled up in her eyes. Why not? Because, I said, ice threading through every word. You weren't saying that until you realized I could replace you. A sob burst from her throat, but I didn't let her finish. You made your bed. Now you get to lie in it. Alone. That was the breaking point. Her composure shattered, and she collapsed into the chair. Tears pouring down her cheeks. She never believed it would come to this. She thought she held all the power, that no matter what she did, I would always be there clinging to the fantasy of us. She was wrong, and now she had to live with the consequences. And she wasn't alone in her panic. John was falling apart too. The next morning, my phone rang again. His voice was frantic the moment I picked up. I swear, man, I didn't mean for this to happen. I thought she was serious about opening the relationship. She told me you were fine with it. I couldn't help but laugh. So you believed a married woman looking for an excuse to cheat on her husband? There was a pause, heavy and awkward. I didn't know she'd fall apart like this, he finally admitted, his voice tight with guilt. She came to my place last night, crying. She said you were divorcing her and it was my fault. I smirked. And I can't let this ruin me. His voice cracked with desperation. I have a reputation. I work with her. If this gets out, I cut him off sharply. You should have thought about that before you slept with another man's wife. He exhaled shakily. Look, man, I don't want trouble. Can we work something out? Maybe you don't go through with the separation. Maybe we... I hung up before he could finish. The final nail in her coffin. Later that day, I handed her the official separation agreement, every word a reminder of the choices she had made. She stared at it, eyes hollow, fingers trembling as she flipped through the pages. I don't want this, she whispered. I leaned back. It's not up to you anymore. She had asked for choices when she suggested opening the marriage. Now she had none. Her voice broke. I can't do this without you. I tilted my head. You thought you could, though, didn't you? A sob tore through her. Please, let's work this out. I'll cut John off. I'll prove to you that I still love you. I smiled. You've already proven everything I needed to know.